Um, Hopefully I'll figure it out tomorrow.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host for this episode. My name is Samantha.
So when I get back,
Oh, my name's Jeff.
so
I'm Alondra.
And I'm Anna.
Today, we'll be discussing the positive effect of ethnic studies on students and the possible negative effects if an ethnic studies course isn't properly prepared. So, for our first question for today, what are the positive impacts ethnic studies has had on students?
I think the positive impact for ethnic studies is that kids can like learn different perspectives and also learn like different cultures from like everything, and also helps them like basically like learn things like how do I say this, like they can read something like how do I say this, like they can read something and then they realize like it like also like a big impact on them, like how important it is to have like little things that they like. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wait.
I think one of the positive effects is like students feel more engaged, especially because like the curriculum that we have doesn't really involve like our cultures. So when students see themselves reflected in the material that they're learning, then they're more engaged, and I feel like they're more eager even to like show up to school and to go to class. Because most of the time, like students will ditch and stuff, especially when they feel like, oh, the subject is boring, like I don't like this, I don't like that. But when you have a good ethnic studies class where they're constantly being taught about their history, then they feel engaged and they feel valued in their classroom.
Yeah, that's a really important point, and I feel that leads us into our next question, which is what are the effects of poor ethnic study courses? And I can start this one off. So according to Sleater in his article, The Academic and Social Value of Ethnic Studies, in 2011, um, when we have courses that are centered around a Eurocentric point of view, it causes many students to disengage from academic learning, which Alondra brought up earlier. It has also consistently been demonstrated that ethnic studies, a curriculum that reflects the experiences of students of color, has a positive impact on student academic engagement, achievement, and empowerment, especially when linked with culturally responsive teaching grounded in high academic expectations. So it can be seen that when curriculum reflected the culture of the students, it affected them positively both academically and socially. So when we deprive them of a good ethnic studies course, we're depriving them of these really positive, long-lasting effects.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And then I think also like when we were planning for a project, we kept in mind like the positive effects and the negative effect, the effects of when an ethnic studies course isn't taught properly. And we talked how like when students are disengaged, that leads to a whole chain of effects. And like when students aren't being taught an effective ethnic studies course, then they kind of go to school, but they're not really learning anything because yes, they're learning like what is expected for them to be taught, but they don't learn anything about themselves, and therefore they don't have an identity. And they go to school, they're walking around, and like they truly don't even know who they are because they haven't been taught anything about their history, their culture, their story, and they just feel disconnected, which causes them to perform bad academically. And there was this one statistic as well, and I think it's in I'm sorry, it was in the cultural relevance article, the casual effects of cultural relevance. And it says that this was a study in 2015, and it says the mathematics knowledge of eighth grade Black and Hispanic students in public school lags behind that of their white peers by an amount equivalent to roughly 2 to 3 full years of learning. So color, um, students of color are falling behind because they don't connect at all with what they are being taught. On the other hand, we have white students who can relate to everything on all areas of what they're being taught. And then we have our students of color who just completely feel disengaged. And yeah, so they don't perform as well as everybody else.
Yeah, that's a really important point to include. And for our next question, so we've been seeing that when ethnic studies is administered correctly, there's really positive impacts. So why has there been such a pushback on these courses?
I think there's a pushback like for this because like out of like I forgot who said this, but they said like those like teachers who are has like a credential in social studies, like they were told to teach ethnic studies, but they don't have like a lot of resources, and the resources that they would use, they'll basically learn like not very culturally, but like basically like what my professor, he was recently before he was a professor, he was a world history teacher, and he showed a book to his students, and every book he would like turn to, it's always a white man or like a European man. So then as he's going, like all you learn from there is just their perspective and how they through the world and stuff, but they never talk about like the cultures. If they were talking about the cultures and stuff, they'll always like talk about like the bad things that happen to them and stuff. So I think that's why, like the lack of resources that are provided to the teachers.
Yeah, I would say there's also been a pushback mostly because a lot of people don't agree with ethnic studies. Like um like Anna was saying, you know, our professor said he would open a book, he'd be teaching, open a book that is titled World History, but you only have European people, white people on it. And so a lot of people think that like, oh, ethnic studies is trying to say like America's this, like we don't care about America, we don't care about Europe, and it creates division. But the truth is we're not. We're just bringing to the light other cultures and their viewpoints that have been hidden, because it's like when we're talking about the Civil War and we're talking about the North versus the South and we're talking about Americans and Black people. And it's like, where were the Hispanics during this time? They're not mentioned at all when we're being taught that. And it's like, that's kind of what happens, that a lot of the narratives are being hidden, but the people like push back on ethnic studies because they're like, oh, if you talk about this culture, then you're like you know, you're kind of like challenging the ideas that have been in order for a long time. And a lot of people don't like change, especially when change favors them, and so they don't want to see any other narratives reflected um in our curriculum now.
Thank you for sharing. And for our final question, how have we individually felt ethnic studies impacted us? And if we didn't have a chance to take an ethnic studies course, do we wish we could have had that opportunity? And I'd like to start this one off. I personally have never taken an ethnic studies course, but hearing what my peers have said about them, I feel that it would have been a very helpful experience that could have expanded my worldview. Um, Luckily, I will be taking my first ethnic studies course next semester. So yeah, I'm sure that'll turn out well.
Yeah, for in my experience in high school, my classes have been great about including all sorts of cultures and ethnicities into the of the history. And it taught me a lot about about people from Africa or Asia or South America. Um, and I think it really helped me kind of just get a better understanding of the world. And I'm really grateful for that. Um, and I was able to take ethnic studies this semester, so it was a really good class too.
In my perspective, I took an ethnic studies in my junior year in high school, and I'll say like what I experienced or what I've learned in that class. And I'm really grateful I took that class because it just like made me like I thought it was gonna be like another like a core class like world history and what I forgot and I think US history. I thought just like those classes, but when I was in the ethnic study class, I learned like the like very deep stuff. And then like I really like it because it just hit me and yeah, like it like basically hit me to reality. But like the other classes I just like learned like something I'm not really interested in. And I think Alondra like mentioned something about like if the teacher were to like teach good, then the kids would be more engaged. And I think that's all I have to say.
So I also took an ethnic studies class in high school. I'm really glad to hear that Jeff had like a very positive experience. I attended Fremont High School in the community where I'm from. And so we're mostly Black and Hispanic students. And so we had two ethnic studies courses, one African American studies, one Mexican American studies. And I think you could tell that there was such a huge generalization because the African American studies were all filled with like Black students. Like if you were a Black student, they would automatically kind of put you in their class. And then for the Mexican American studies, it was like all brown students. And so I remember, I'm not Mexican. And I remember on my first day, I showed up to class and I was like 2 days late because I had been placed in a different class and then I switched. And the teacher, she was kind of like, "Oh, hi, like, nice to meet you. You're gonna love it here. You're gonna learn so much about yourself." And it was like, honestly, I didn't really learn anything about myself. I did learn a lot about Mexico and its history, so I do know a lot about that and like the Aztecs, Hernan Cortés, La Malinche, um, the story behind one of the, Spanish curse words and stuff like that. And it was a very interesting class, I'm not gonna lie, but it was like I didn't really learn anything about myself. I also took the African American Studies course, which I do feel that the teacher did a better job at teaching that class. Um, but then again, I think one of the other things that we were kind of talking about earlier amongst ourselves, with them was that most of the time, when we're teaching like ethnic studies or we've experienced an ethnic studies class, you always hear about all the negative stuff and like oppression and slavery and the suffering. And I feel like it's very important for us not just to focus on like the oppression and the suffering, but to focus on like the light ahead and the bright future that lies ahead of us. Because I know we all have like different ethnicities and different cultural backgrounds. And you don't just like to hear about what your people went through, but you like to hear about their achievements as well. And I think it's important for us to carry that with us into ethnic studies courses as well.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you everyone for sharing. And thank you for listening to this podcast episode. Join us next time where Jeff will be hosting our episode. And thank you so much for listening.